Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. I am happy to have Automotive Seminars as a sponsor for the show. Now, if you're not familiar, Automotive Seminars is a diagnostic technician training company. They've got a website that there'll be a link to in the show notes. And what they offer is top-notch training to technicians like us in the field. I've been taking their training courses for years and have got a ton of benefit out of it. They've got top-notch instructors, John Thornton, Scott Schotten, Scott Manna, and every other month they've got a 2-night course that you can sign up for. Join in, ask questions, and afterwards, you've paid for the course, you can access a recorded version whenever you want. You can rewatch the class 2 years later in case you wanted some details on it, and that is a fantastic feature. So make sure to check out the website to see what courses they have available and what's coming up in the future. This podcast is brought to you by Jarhead Diagnostics. Jarhead Diagnostics manufactures in-house diagnostic equipment and storage solutions, as well as distributes for companies like Pico, ATS, and Topdon. One of my favorite tools that I have bought from Brandon and Jarhead Diag is the case for the U-Scope. If you don't have a U-Scope, you probably should, but if you have one, you got to get one of these 3D printed cases, has a magnet on it, has a full-size BNC lead that you can connect to, and it gets rid of the weak point of that scope, which is the mini BNC connection, which is pretty fragile. This case makes this thing nice and secure and makes it an even better tool than it was. So check out jarheaddiag.com. The link is in the show notes. For this month, November 2023, all shipping for Jarhead Diagnostics products is free. You don't pay for anything if you order something in the month of November. That's jarheaddiagnostics.com. Check it out. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and I'll be your host once again for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving weekend. We're getting back at it here now, though. I've got a case study to share with you today. It follows along with the theme of a lot of the other case studies that I've been sharing recently, is ones that are kind of difficult to get through, beat us up a little bit. Maybe we make the wrong call, but eventually did get to the solution. This one was kind of a strange one to get to the final solution. And I'll explain exactly why that is, but we made the wrong call along the way to try to get there, or at least I think we did. And again, I'll explain that as we go through this one. But the vehicle we're dealing with here is a 2016 Ram ProMaster City. And so this is the smaller version of the ProMaster that would be the same as like a Ford Transit Connect, right? So they have the big full-size Transits and then the little one, like the one I drive for mobile work. Same thing on the Ram side. This is like a 4-cylinder. It's got the multi-air engine that's in the Dodge Darts, and it's a smaller version of the van. But anyways, the shop had called us in to take a look at the fact that the airbag light was on in this vehicle that they got from their customer, but there's no codes in the airbag module, and they weren't really sure where to go with it because they didn't see anything, that was necessarily wrong besides the fact that the light was on. And the customer just said, "Hey, this light's on. This is the way I purchased it. Can you help me out with this and get this light off?" All right. So that's why we were called in. And what we ended up finding was exactly what they were saying, is that there was no code in the airbag module itself. But we did do a full system scan on the vehicle. We always do, and you should just do a full pre-scan and post-scan for reasons of protecting yourself in case you got to go back to it and prove what was there, what wasn't there before you started. But then also the full system scan of the vehicle just gives you the whole picture, right? And this is a perfect example of, yeah, okay, there are no codes in the module pertaining to the light, right? So we don't have anything in the airbag module, or they call it the ORC in this particular vehicle. But there is a code in the body control module of this. And that's the one that got us to where we needed to go on this one, or at least got us going down the path that we needed to go, because it was the only code that we saw that may even have something to do with, or at least we thought it had something to do with the problem that we were having. It was something to go with, right? And sometimes that's all you can do. You don't have any codes. Well, let's go with what we have and see if it leads us to a solution. Now, there was a code in the PCM for a small evap leak. We weren't concerned about that. The shop wasn't concerned about that, at least. And in the body control module, there was a B10AA-4A, which says check configuration failed, incorrect component installed. Okay, and that's active in the BCM. You can clear this out and it pops right back up. Okay. Now, again, only warning light that we see on the dash is that airbag light. The evap leak was actually a history code, but there are no codes in the airbag module. There is a code in the BCM, and it returns every single time. And so this was something that we're going to look into and see. We're not, I'm not sure right away from the initial scan that okay, this is related to our problem, but it's something. That's a hard fault, and we don't have anything going on in the airbag module. All right, let's at least pursue this code and see what it's relating to. But that was the key there, is doing the full system scan so that we can see, is there any other modules setting codes that may relate to our problem, even though, the body control module isn't directly in control of the airbag light. This might have something to do with it. So we're going to look into this. And if you look up the definition for this B10AA-4A, and do keep in mind that the subcodes are important for a lot of these, well, a lot of codes nowadays in general, but body codes, definitely you want to take a peek at that subcode. And what I mean by that is like the last two digits. And that can change the entire meaning of the code. So do pay attention to that. And that's why I'm giving you the whole thing in case you want to look this code up and look at the flow chart. 4A is at the end of this. But anyways, the definition of this says that the BCM, the body control module, sets this DTC when it detects a mismatch between the vehicle as detected by the body control module and the BCM proxy configuration. Okay. So what it's saying is the configuration data that has been programmed or written into the body control module for this VIN number, for this truck, something doesn't match that's actually on the vehicle. And that's, it says in the definition of the code that it's a check configuration, incorrect component installed, but that's the actual definition of the code, is it's comparing to what it has as far as the proxy data and what's actually on the vehicle. So again, this is something that we wanted to pursue, if for no other reason than it's the only thing that we had to go with. We did some searches on, airbag light with no codes, didn't find anything with TSBs or known problems. And so this is kind of the code that we have to go with just to see, is this going to get us somewhere? And that's what we're thinking, is maybe there is an incorrect component installed or something like that. Maybe this has something to do with our airbag scenario, why the light's on, but there's no codes. Now, if you look under the list of possible reasons why this code could set, there's a whole bunch of different things, but I'm going to read some of them off to you, because this is what
kind of got us thinking like, oh, maybe we should pursue this, right? Because you could make the argument that that's a stretch to go for this code right off the bat. But again, we didn't have much else to go with. But after reading this, we're like, we definitely need to make sure that this isn't our issue, that we need to eliminate this as a possibility. And maybe it's unrelated. But, anyways, the possible causes for this code in the body control module, it says components or modules that have been added to the vehicle that are not supported in the original proxy configuration, right? So the proxy configuration is what's equipped on this particular vehicle, this VIN number. Okay, so it's saying something could have been added that wasn't equipped in the original configuration. Now, we could pretty safely assume that this thing came equipped with airbags, right? That was going to be on any of these ProMasters. So it's not like somebody added on an airbag module that it wasn't originally equipped with. The next one's components supported by the proxy configuration have been disconnected, or one or more of the modules are inactive or not responding. Okay, so maybe that's a possibility. Maybe it can't communicate with the airbag module somehow. There's no communication codes, but okay, that's something maybe we want to consider looking at. Is there some sort of communication issue between the two? The BCM was replaced, but the proxy configuration has not been programmed. Maybe that's it. Maybe that has something to do with it. And I wouldn't know why there's no codes in the airbag module, but maybe we need to shift our focus to the BCM here. That's possible. And the BCM is installed in the incorrect vehicle. Okay, so that kind of goes along with the last one, but maybe somebody replaced the BCM on this at some point. And at this point, we do need to get some more info from the shop and the customer, but we're just kind of reading through our initial findings here to get a direction. The last two is BCM not configured correctly, or just a failed body control module. So a lot of things here for this particular code are pointing at the BCM, but it's also saying that there could be an issue with another module on there that's not configured. Okay. So we want to look at what it says to do here in the flow chart, right? And I don't always follow the flow chart step by step, but I do want to take a look through and see, okay, what does Chrysler say is the steps to take to figure out which one of these are the cause of the problem that are setting this code. And I'm hoping within that it will guide me to a point that leads me to connection with the airbag module. And then we can say, okay, yes, these are related. Let's definitely solve this particular code. Because I'm still at the possibility that this code's unrelated and it doesn't matter, but it's a hard fault and things are kind of lining up. So within the flow chart for this DTC, first thing it has you do, and we already did this, was clear the code and see if it resets. It does. It's a hard fault. Okay. And I'll save all the codes in the pre-scan. And if that's something that I feel like I might need freeze frame data, I'm going to look at that. But a lot of times I'll clear codes out and just see, okay, what does come back right away? What is a hard fault? And this one was. So that's step one in the flow chart. And it is definitely a hard fault every single time. You don't even need to start the vehicle. The next step is to say, it says to check the BCM VIN versus the vehicle VIN and make sure that it matches. And that's a good check to make. And it would help us determine, hey, was this BCM replaced by something else? Did somebody put a used one in here? Now, a used one on this 2016 would actually require some fancy footwork to get it to operate correctly, but we'll still make sure that something like that didn't happen. And we look and the VIN number does match. Now, with all the programming and cloning options out there, that doesn't mean that this isn't a used BCM, but at least somebody, if they replaced it, they were able to match the VIN number. So that step in the flow chart doesn't come up with anything. And then one of the next steps in this chart, and this is the one that kind of got us going where we needed to go, or at least helped us make the connection that we were hoping to make, was it says to perform a proxy alignment, which is going to align, if you will, all of the modules on the vehicle with the configuration data that's stored in the body control module. And this is taking the data that the VIN number has programmed for that vehicle that's stored in the body control module, and it's basically going to check all of the modules on the vehicle and align them if they need to be configured to the VIN number information. So if that doesn't make sense, I'll explain that in a better way. But basically what we need to do is perform proxy alignment. And actually, I thought this would be a good point to go over exactly what a proxy alignment is on an FCA vehicle, right? And by FCA, that's Fiat, Chrysler. I think it's Fiat Chrysler Automotive Group is the FCA. And in 2014, Fiat and Chrysler merged to make FCA. And in about 2015, they started making what I usually refer to as like a Fiat architecture vehicle. And that's about the time that they required these proxy learns or proxy alignments after a module is replaced, or sometimes even in a battery disconnection, right? I've seen this on a number of vehicles where a battery is disconnected and the odometer is flashing, or the battery dies or is disconnected, and then the transmission is setting all kinds of codes and slams into gear. And what's required at that point is the proxy alignment or proxy configuration. And what this is exactly, and just for everybody's reference, you might know this, you might be aware of this, but I actually was thinking, I didn't know what the proxy, that actual word or abbreviation, even really meant. I knew it was taking BCM data and it was configuring the rest of the modules, but if somebody were to say, well, what's the proxy mean? I didn't know, like, is it proximity? And it turns out it's not. What this is the body control module stores and it compares vehicle configuration data with the electronic control units in the vehicle. Okay. And that's why this code is there, right? It has data that it's been programmed with based on the VIN number, based on the original sales codes of the vehicle. And when the key is on at any time, the BCM is checking to see, hey, are these other modules configured properly? And that's why this code sets, because there's one that's not. All right. And when you do the proxy alignment, this is a process and this is out of Chrysler service information. That's where I found this. It says this is a process that's referred to as programming of configuration of systems integrated. Okay, I'll say that again. Programming of configuration of systems integrated. So if you take the PR, programming, the O of, the C of configuration, of systems, that's S in systems, and I of integrated, you have PROCSI, which they say also known as PROXI, proxy. So that's where they get the proxy. I didn't come up with it. It's weird, but at least you know now, because I didn't know before. So that's why I looked it up. So anyways, that's the proxy in the proxy alignment. Okay. And it says if a configuration mismatch is detected, the BCM sets a DTC, which is exactly what we have here. And within that flowchart of that DTC, it tells us to do the alignment process, and maybe that'll just take care of everything. That's kind of what we're hoping, but we're going to try it and see what happens here. So what we're doing is we're taking that retained information in the body control module that relates to the specific vehicle, and we're going to perform this alignment, which is going to transfer that information to other modules on the vehicle, like the transmission control module or the instrument panel or our ORC or restraints controller, right? And there's other modules on there. Not every module on the vehicle is going to utilize the proxy alignment, but the airbag module is one of them. And like I mentioned, the instrument cluster, you might see the odometer flashing after battery disconnect. The TCM transmission computer, you may have some shifting issues after a battery disconnect on some of these. And it doesn't seem to always happen when the battery dies or goes dead, but I've seen it a lot on the Jeeps in relationship to the cluster, and I've seen it a lot on these specific ProMasters in the transmission after a battery disconnect. So anyways, we're going to perform this proxy alignment, or at least attempt to. When you do this, when you start the proxy alignment function, and you can do this with aftermarket tools. We're using YTech at this point, which is the factory Chrysler tool, but do keep in mind this isn't something that you absolutely need YTech for. I know that TopDown will do some of these. I think Autel will as well. I know even Snap-on will do proxy alignments on some Chryslers. But we're using YTech here just because it's the factory tool. It's going to do the job correctly. And I don't have to guess. If something fails, I don't have to guess, is it my tool or is it the car? I can be fairly confident that YTech's going to work correctly. But what it's telling me here is a summary of all the modules before it even begins, right? And so it's going to give you a breakdown of everything that needs to be in alignment when referring to the proxy alignment. And it'll give me a list and say, yes, these are in alignment or they're out. And it says my ORC, my occupant restraint controller, is out of alignment, which is great news for me because I hadn't even really made a for sure connection yet, but this is what I was hoping to see. Okay. So our airbag module is out of alignment with the rest of the vehicle. So now things are making sense and we can really pursue this code and say, yes, we got to solve why this configuration code's in here. And it might just be running a proxy alarm and then we're done. We're out of there. I wouldn't be doing an episode on it if that was it, but we're thinking that at the time is, hey, maybe we just need to do this alignment. So we're going to go ahead and do it. I wasn't even going to ask the shop. This is another click of a button at this point. So I'm just going to run it and see what happens. Okay, so we try the proxy alignment, but we get an error message and it will not complete. It says that the ORC or occupant restraint controller is not accepting the configuration. It also mentions something about having the incorrect component installed here. And there's a big clue here. But at this point, we did want to ask the shop, like, hey, was anything replaced on this vehicle, particularly the airbag module? Because what it's pointing to at the moment, I don't know why the proxy learn didn't complete here, but I would like to know at this point, was anything replaced? Did you guys put a new module in? And we double checked with them and said, hey, did you guys put anything in? They're like, no. Are you aware of anything being put in? They said no, but they were going to call the customer. And in the meantime, we're going to keep digging into this. But they're like, we're not aware of anything that was replaced. Doesn't mean that there wasn't, but we didn't put anything new in this vehicle. And we said, okay, well, we'll keep going here with what and try to make a for sure determination, but something's up here in relation to the airbag module and it's not accepting our proxy learn and it's blocking us specifically in regards to the airbag module. Says it's out of alignment, but it won't go. It's just giving us an error message. Now, back to our message here and what we looked at while we were kind of waiting to hear back from the shop and the customer is it did say incorrect component installed. Now, this was something that we did not pursue fully, and I was trying to help out my employee over the phone the best that I could in this situation, but we definitely missed a big opportunity to get to the solution on this one at this point. And that's kind of why I'm talking about it on the show, so that if you find yourself in this position, you won't do the same thing. You'll be aware of this because we missed this. And I'll explain exactly what I'm talking about here. But anyways, under the error message that we got when we attempted the proxy learn, it said incorrect component installed. And then it said driver side pretensioner. And that was it. It didn't say anything else about it. It didn't reference anything. It just said driver side pretensioner. It's like, okay, there's no other information. There are no codes. Again, in this airbag module, there's no codes. And we even went into the data stream just to see, is there like maybe is this, because my thought was when he told me that it said something about a pretensioner, I'm like, well, maybe the pretensioner is open. Maybe it was deployed. And that is maybe what is blocking us from programming. I've seen on Kia Hyundais where you replace an airbag module after airbag deployment, and you have to do a variant coding on the Kia Hyundais. It's kind of like a programming, but you're just entering the variant code that pertains to that particular vehicle, and it won't accept it if there's any circuit issues present. Now, those will set circuit codes, but and then they'll tell you, okay, replace this component. I'm thinking along the lines of like, maybe that's what we're dealing with here. And so I'm on the phone with Steve and I told him, I was like, well, while we are waiting to hear back from them about this airbag module, let's just see if it's plugged in, number one. And if it is, and you can get to it, let's just slap a resistor in place, a 2 ohm resistor, and see if that changes anything for us. So he found it was plugged in. The connector, was fully seated and everything with the connector assurance tab and all that stuff. And so he unplugs it and he plugs the 2 ohm resistor in place, tries everything again, gets the exact same errors. Nothing happens. Okay. And so at that point, we had tried this multiple times. We even tried some aftermarket tooling. We get the same result, incorrect component installed. And it does have that mention about the driver's side pretensioner, but we have nothing else to go with, right? No codes, no data stream, no nothing. And we're talking back and forth and just really wondering why this module is just not taking the configuration, right? Even if there's a circuit code, you'd think that it would accept the configuration when we do this proxy learn, but it's not doing that. And we look through SI too to see if there's anything that we're missing. Like, is there any other steps? Is there something that we should be aware of? And all it says to do in SI is replace the module and then do a proxy alignment. And then there's an initialization through the miscellaneous functions of the scan tool, but that's after you do the proxy alignment, which we haven't done that yet. So at this point, the shop came back to us and said, we're still not aware if this had been replaced or not, as far as anything on the car, the ORC or anything else. But they did say that the customer recently purchased the vehicle this way. We're like, okay. And we're not physically at the airbag module, but you can look up some, part numbers through the scan tool. And one of the things we did look for, even though that SI didn't say it, we're like, does this module need separate programming, right? Because our proxy learn it's not an actual programming event, if you will, like you would normally do with a Chrysler module. But it turns out this module doesn't have that. Like, it doesn't exist. There's no file to get for it. There's no actual program for the airbag module. It's just that proxy learn. But while we were in there, we did, find the part number. And so again, we're kind of thinking, did this thing get replaced potentially with the wrong part number, the wrong module? Is that what we're up against here? Because we don't seem to be able to get anywhere doing any of the steps that SI is indicating, and we don't see any other issues at the moment.
Hey, have you ever been faced with the challenge of sourcing, installing, and programming a used control module in a vehicle? I know a lot of us have. It seems to be happening more and more often today with the volume of control modules on vehicles, the cost of some new ones, or even the availability of new control modules. In some cases, used may be the only option. So what do you do here? I strongly recommend checking out SJ Auto Solutions and Tommy Oliva. Tommy offers a cloning service for used control modules to make these things plug and play for the vehicle that you're working on. In a lot of cases, he is also able to source the control modules if you're unable to locate one for the vehicle that you're working on. But once you get connected with Tommy, he's going to offer fantastic support from start to finish to make sure that that control module is going to work in your application. He's also got tech support that he offers through his website, along with some free resources there as well on information about used control module programming. So make sure to check out SJ Auto Solutions. I can't recommend that enough.
See any other issues at the moment. So one of the things that you can do if you want to see, and I was on the phone with Steve and I'm kind of thinking, hey, maybe this thing wasn't a crash. Maybe they got it from an auction. One of the quick ways you can find this out, especially if the customer is like, I don't know exactly where it came from or what happened to it, is if you just Google stolen VIN check, it's going to come up, and I can put the website in the show notes of the episode. It's www.nicb.org/VINcheck. And you type in the VIN, you fill out a CAPTCHA, and then it's going to show you if the vehicle's been stolen, but then also if it has a total loss on the record of the vehicle. And it'll actually say the cause of the total loss. And this one didn't show up as a theft vehicle, but it did show up as a total loss vehicle. And it even says the date of and the reason for, which was a collision. Okay, so now we know, okay, this thing wasn't a wreck. Okay, airbags probably did deploy, and someone most likely replaced the airbag module. And that's what we're dealing with here. It sure seems like that. Now, if somebody did, we should be able to just run that configuration and move through the steps and get this thing out the door, but we're blocked here. And it does say incorrect component installed every time we try to do that proxy learn. So again, we're kind of thinking wrong module here. And the part number that we found, we matched this up to what we found in RepairLink Shop. You can enter the VIN, find your airbag module, add it to your cart, look at the part number, does it match? It didn't. It wasn't the same number. Now, sometimes, there can be a supersession of part numbers, something like that. But what we found in there didn't match. And nothing we could do allowed us to move on from this process. And so at this point, what we told the shop to do was, hey, we're pretty certain that this airbag module had been replaced, but we're suspecting that it had been replaced with the wrong part number. And this is based off of what we're seeing in the scan tool. And we gave them the part number off for RepairLink, and we said, hey, maybe physically access this module. You might be able to verify that, yes, this is new, or maybe it's not, right? Maybe it's the complete wrong module and it's used. I don't know if that's the case, but check it out and see, does this match up with the vehicle? Do the part numbers stamped on the module match what we're showing you here? And if they don't, or if there's any suspicion, here's your part number, get the right module, and then we'll try this again. Okay, so the shop does that. What they end up finding, they said, hey, yeah, those part numbers don't match what you gave us. And so they called the dealership and they got a brand new module, which the part numbers actually do match what we found in RepairLink. They install the module, call us back. Hey, come program this thing. We do. We attempt it again, and it gives us the exact same results. We try to do that proxy learn. We get incorrect component installed. And there is, again, a message about a driver's side pretensioner. Okay, so if you've worked on these vehicles before, you probably already know which direction we're headed here. But we felt, like, oh boy, we made the wrong call here. Now, the wrong part number thing, I don't know. I'm not sure on that, what the deal was there. But it didn't really matter at this point because we have got the exact same thing going on. And now we need to figure out what the heck's going on here. So kind of back to square one on this. Deciding where to go. And I actually made a trip to this vehicle at this point so that I could help and get my hands and eyes on it. Sometimes being away from the vehicle makes this stuff a little tougher. I'd say most of the time, actually, but I wanted to actually get on the vehicle physically and see what we could see. So the only thing we really have to go with here is that message that we get along with the failed proxy learn for the ORC. This is driver side pretensioner. And this is every single time you get the same thing. And I double check the codes. There are none besides the configuration code in the BCM. I double check the data stream to see, is there resistance data PIDs that I could look at for the airbags and the pretensioners. There's nothing in there. They don't offer you anything. Now, I didn't know if this was something that changed once the module's configured, but in the unconfigured state, you don't have anything. And I look through SI to see, the replacement procedure for this module or when bags are deployed, and there's really nothing listed in reference to this. Just says to do the proxy learn, and then after that, do an initialization. And I want to see, could I do this initialization? No, not until you configure it. You got nothing on this thing. The one thing I did find when I was looking through SI was that this particular vehicle uses 2 pretensioners per seat, which is not uncommon. But when I was talking to Steve on the phone, when he was working on it, didn't really click in our heads and we didn't look for it. This thing has 2 different pretensioners. So the one that he checked initially was the anchor point for the seatbelt. Well, there's one in the retractor too. And when he was checking it, I didn't even really think to ask him, hey, check, the retractor and check the anchor point. just check the pretensioner. And he did. He checked the anchor point one, and he wasn't thinking that there was one in the retractor. So we never checked it. We never pursued this further. But as soon as I saw that in the diagram, I'm like, okay, we need to check the other pretensioner on this driver's side here and see what's going on. And again, the anchor point was fine, but the pretensioner had deployed. Now, the weird thing was this seatbelt worked. I found a lot of times when the pretensioners actually deploy that you can't use the retractable portion of the seatbelt very well anymore. This one did. So I don't know if it was a deployment for it or if it was just physically open as far as resistance went. But what we did was we unplugged the retractor assembly. We put a little 2 ohm resistor in there, and you can get those with the AES U terminal kit. They have the airbag simulator, and you can just pop them into place, and it simulates the resistance of the deployment loop that's found in a pretensioner or an airbag to make the computer happy, which is what we really need in this point. And after we put that 2 ohm resistor in place of the retractor assembly, and then hit the proxy learn, it went through, configured all the modules, okay, including the ORC, which is what we were hoping for. Now, after we completed that configuration, we unplugged that 2 ohm resistor. Now the airbag module sets a code for that driver side pretensioner circuit open. And I looked in the data PIDs, there still wasn't any data PIDs to be seen, but it had a specific code for exactly what we're looking for. And if you look up that circuit codes, tells you to go to the retractor, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is normal airbag circuitry stuff at this point, but it needed that configuration to even give us the trouble code. But because that airbag retractor was open, it wouldn't let it do the configuration. All right. So again, just to summarize that, these airbag modules require a proxy learn after replacement before they'll function or set codes. There's no actual programming here. It's just the configuration with a proxy learn. All right. And before they're configured, the BCM sets that configuration code saying, hey, configure this. And you do get a light, but you don't have any codes. And they won't complete the configuration in order to set codes, tell you what's wrong, until all of the circuit issues are repaired. Okay. So the first airbag module is in this thing. Somebody replaced it. Somebody put it in, and they either put in a retractor assembly that was incorrect for the vehicle, failed, open. Maybe it was the one that went off in the crash. That I don't know, but it had a circuit issue. There was an open circuit. And so they were never able to configure this. And so they sent it out the door. I don't know, sent it to auction. I don't know how the customer ended up with it in the state that they did, but that's how they got it. And then we put another new one in, ended up with the same thing, and eventually got through it. Now, would that first module have worked had we put that resistor in place, configured it? Maybe. Again, I don't know. The part number didn't match up, but I'm really not sure where the module came from. But that was our issue, is that there was a circuit problem. So if you have a situation like this, you'll know what to look for. And the key is, after the failure of the proxy alignment, it tells you what component to go look at. You just need to be aware that, hey, there's 2 different pretensioners on the seat belts of these things. And then you're just doing circuit testing. And basically at that point, you don't have codes to go with, you don't have data PIDs to go with, but you're going to put resistors in place and then run that proxy learn until it completes. And as soon as it completes, okay, we know we fixed the problem. Or if you have the original module, plug that in, and that's going to give you the circuit codes that you're going to need. Now, that'll have deployment codes in it as well, but you should be able to use active and stored as far as the status of the code to determine the component that's failed if you have the original module. We didn't have that here, but if you do, you can figure out, okay, I need to fix all of these components circuitry wise and make the computer happy with the circuits, or it won't even run the proxy learn. So kind of a weird setup. And again, there's no warning of this in service information. They don't tell you that this is how it's set up, or that there's some precaution on the replacement of the module. Like, hey, you need to have all the circuit codes fixed. And I mean, it makes sense, but the fact that it wouldn't even let you get it set up when there are circuit codes are pretty interesting. So that's why I wanted to share that one with everybody, is just in case you run into it. But I thought it was pretty interesting. And Yeah, that's the sort of stuff we run into out there. So that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank everybody out there for listening and all the feedback I get on the show. I always appreciate that. So keep that up. But other than that, let's get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.